Hi, if you've been watching the previous videos for this series, what we've done so far is we created a form in Google Forms which asks people to complete their uniform requests. Then we took that data, it automatically creates its own Google Sheet. And then we took the data from the Google Sheet and popped it into Excel. And we did a little bit of tidying up in Excel, things like Google gives you the timestamp. The date stamp comes as an American date, so we fixed that and we split it into two different columns, one for date and one for time. We had a full name column in the original form, which we've then split into a first name and last name column. And scooting over this way a little bit, we had the word quantity and the quantity in each of these columns, so we wouldn't have been able to do a sum on it. So we've split that using text to columns and made sure these values are stored as numbers. And I think that's all we've had to do with the sheet. So the next stage is I want to do a pivot table report. I think the first thing I want to know is how many people completed my form, and maybe by date or something like that. So I'm going to start in the middle of my data anyway. You don't need to select the whole thing. I'm going to go insert from the top tab up here and then pivot chart and pivot table. It should have automatically picked up the table arrange because this is named as a table by doing format as table, and you can see that it has, because you can see these little marching ants. I don't know how well you can see that on the screen, but there's little marching ants marching around the whole table. And you can set it onto a new worksheet, or if you've already set up your worksheet, you can choose existing. I'm going to choose existing and then just click onto this response summary sheet that I've created already, and I'll pop it into A1. And then you're ending up with a blank space where your chart is going to go and a blank space where your table is going to go. And I think I'm just interested in who completed the form and when. So I'm going to say I'll have the date the form completed in my axis area. And can you see it's already summarised by April, May and June. All of these dates are 2026 anyway. And then basically I want to count how many people responded. So it doesn't really matter which field you use because it's a text field. It's just going to count how many rows there are. So I'm going to say count by full name. Let's say I'm going to put full name in the values area. If this was a value, it would sum it by default. But because it's it's the name of the person, all it can do is count how many records there are. So you can see basically it's saying 5 people responded in April, 47 people in May, 48 people in June. And actually if you unfold these little areas, you can see the specific dates that they responded. It's made a matching little chart to go with it, which counts the number of people that have submitted a response. And if you wanted to split it down further, you could maybe put something like department into the legend area, and then it will show you this is the number of people from accounts, this is the number of people from construction, etc. I'm just going to pop that little chart underneath. The other thing that we haven't looked at yet in this series is the filters area. There was a question in the form that said, are you a new starter? Because I'm assuming that new starters get a full set of kit and then other people order replacements as time goes on. So I'm going to pop that are you a new starter in the filter area. And what that means is you can have all the people who said yes to that question, all the people who said no to that question. So if I say I only want the new starters, I'm going to get just the new people. And if I say no, I want everybody else. This is people ordering replacement items, if you see what I mean. Now, the next thing I want to do is a couple of little tidy up bits and pieces. If you have a look at my columns on my table here, it basically auto fits the column to the width of the text. So it means obviously my sales department column is narrower than my construction column, which I don't really like, I have to say. So if you wanted to make all your columns in your table the same width, I think the easiest way to do it, if you select the A of column A and drag across until you've got all your columns selected, guess whichever you think is your widest column, I suppose, and just move your mouse between the two headings at the top here till you get a little double-headed arrow, and stretch your column just slightly, and then all of the columns become the same width. And what I might do then is resize my chart to fit in that space. However, there is an issue. When you go to refresh your data, the columns resize because that's their default behavior, and then you'd have to do that again next time. So what I'm going to do first is on your Pivot Table Analyze tab, there is an options button, and if I choose the little drop down next to it and then choose options, there's an option down here that says, do you want to auto fit column widths on update? Which I don't, so I'm going to turn that off. And then when I say OK to that, if I resize my columns again, let's just tweak them a little tiny bit. When I refresh next time, they should retain the column widths that I've set without resetting themselves, which looks much nicer. Now I can do a little bit of formatting to make this a bit prettier. It's defaulted to this kind of blue table style, but if I go to the design tab, there's a whole set of different table styles. I'm going to choose one of the simpler ones. I think I'm going to go for, let's say, this little light green fellow. The other thing you can do is you can rename areas of the table to make them a bit more readable. So rather than saying, are you a new starter, I can just put, I don't know, new starter, something. Also with the chart, there's lots of options you can do to change the colour scheme of the chart. If I go to the design tab here, there's a change colour option, and there's kind of pre-designed colour schemes that you can choose. Or if you've got the patience, you can go through and set all the colours individually yourself. At the moment, I don't have any figures on the chart. There is an option where you go to chart element. There's something called data labels, which allows you to choose what labels you want. If I say more data label options, can you see over here on the right hand side, it says, oh, it's got the value, so it's showing you how many people responded. Or you could say, I want the category name, which is the month they responded, or the series name, which is saying the department. I think I'm just going to stick to the values. Now, let's say that's good enough for the number of people that responded to the form. The next thing I would like to do is find out how many people have ordered certain types of equipment. So I'm going to go back to Form Responses tab, and I'm going to create another new pivot table. I'm going to go Insert, Pivot Chart, and Pivot Table. This time I'm going to say I want a new worksheet. So I'll have a separate set of data. And let's say this time I'm interested in a particular type of equipment. I think I'm going to go for, let's say, safety helmets. And because the safety helmets are all in separate categories depending on colour, I'm just going to pop each one of those in the value area. And can you see it's going up? Some of helmets pink, some of helmets red, etc. That's because these are values rather than text. During the previous one, it did a count. Because it was text, it couldn't do anything else. But with this one, it's able to do a sum because it knows that these are values. If I make this a bit bigger, you can see it's saying, okay, yellow is the most popular colour, and then this one is blue, and so on. But the colours are confusing because it uses the default colour scheme that the software dictates. So actually yellow helmets are blue and blue helmets are orange, and so on. So I'm going to go through and change each of these colours individually rather than, last time we went to this change colours option. So if I click onto the first column, there is an option on the Format tab called Shape Fill, and these are supposed to be yellow, so I'm going to choose yellow as my first colour. These are supposed to be blue, so I'm going to make these blue. This next one is supposed to be pink, and for some reason Microsoft doesn't let you have pink, so I have to go to more fill colours to get pink. And then I want to have black. And the last one, oh sorry, I've done the same one twice. This one is black. And the last one is red. Let's go for that red. The other thing I'm not super keen on is having this sum of safety helmets yellow, sum of safety helmets blue, etc. So what I'm going to do is, can you see down in the bottom right hand corner here where it says values? If I choose the little drop down arrow and go into where it says value field settings, this is where you can change the text. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go into value field settings and just change that one to be blue, let's say, and change the next one to be, don't know which one we're on now, pink. Now, because the text is much smaller, you can see it squished up my chart. But again, I'm just going to make my columns much wider and make sure that I've got that option selected that we had before. That does not allow auto fit to contents. Otherwise, every time I refresh it, it would shrink again. And the other thing I'm going to do is put some additional labels on these columns. So if I go to the design tab, there's an option called add chart element, and I'm going to go for data labels. And let's say if I go for outside end, that means the numbers will be at the top of each column. And the other thing I'm going to do, because having taken out the full name here, it's not really clear which product this is now. So I'm also going to add a chart title, and I will say this is safety helmets, oops, by colour, let's say. And I could go through each of the items in my form and create a separate tab for each one. I'm just going to rename this one safety helmets. Now, all of this procedure will update automatically when I update the form. Somebody resubmits a form, I can refresh my Google Sheet and download it into Excel and update my pivot table. But there is a more efficient way of doing it, I think, which is to link the Google form, the Google Sheet rather, to Power BI, which is the next thing I would like to show you in the series. So, I mean, this is a perfectly legitimate way of doing it, but I think you'll find it a smoother journey if you are brave enough to tackle Power BI, and I will come back to the next video and show you how to deal with that.